The Glass Bead Game by Hermann Hesse. Are we ready to listen in reverence to music of the universe and music of the masters? To call to the celebrations the venerated spirits of inspired times? We let ourselves be elevated by secret forms of writing, by whose spell the boundlessness and storms and life itself have emerged as clear parables. They sing like crystal constellations. When we walk in their footsteps, they give meaning to our lives. Not one can fall out of its circle except toward the sacred center.
Flute, a narrator's voice, a poem that's been translated from the German, and some intaglio etchings that have been collaged together. I'm David Bell, and there's a little group of people that have helped me put this video together. And together we're trying to explore what Hermann Hesse's poem is all about, the shards of meaning that fall out from the Glass Bead Game. So I'd like to start with Roger and the wonderful flute playing.
Hello David, it's Roger here. Thank you for the opportunity to work on this lovely poem. Now, I've taken up your idea of starting with a recording of Neptune, and I'm suggesting that you could play it for the first 7 bars. Here's the score, and it goes through to about here. The important thing is, from my point of view, that I'm using the note B as a link between the recording and my playing. So both the bars 3 and bar 7 conclude with a B chord, which could then link to my first phrase. I've written this improvisation in 2 sections. So here I played that twice. It could be more, it could be less, it could go faster or slower. Now that goes on into a bridging phrase which leads into the lacrimae. And here's the bridging phrase. Actually, that was more than a bridging phrase. That I was tempted to carry on and play the lacrimae tune, the first 8 bars of it, which lasts about 1.5 minutes.
Heidi Wilson and I have worked together a couple of times she's done translations for me, and one of the things that I've asked her to do with the Glass Bead Game is to give me a fresh look at this lovely little Hermann Hesse poem. And as she went through it and offered me various ideas, also in combination with Charlotte Froelich, I became aware that I was learning more and more about the meaning of the novel, The Glass Bead Game, as well as the actual poem. And what a wonderful translation it turned out to be. Virtually every line, every phrase conveys a major theme that's there in the novel, reflected in the poem.
Translating das Glasperlenspiel by Hermann Hesse into English. Before you start working on such a translation, it is important to understand the poem and both languages very well. The following words were borrowed from Charlotte Fröhlich's translation of this poem. Prepared, universe, spell, venerated, boundlessness. Keywords from the German version of the poem are das Uferlose, meaning a never-ending body of water, sea or lake. We translated it as boundlessness. Gerann means stopped flowing, solidified. I translated it like this: emerged as clear parables. Choices I had to make. Heilig, holy or sacred. I preferred sacred. It is less common and deeper. Magische Formelschrift. I chose secret forms of writing rather than iconography. It seemed more poetic. Finally, I would like to thank David Bell for making this project possible. I thoroughly enjoyed the challenge to translate this poem into English. Heidi Wilson.
The narrator of the poem, who's also the type designer, who's also the designer of the slides, is John McWade, a kind of international figure in some ways, and I can't say how much I'm grateful to John that he's been involved in these projects with me. We've done 5 poems, I think, now, and what the typography does and the care of the narration is all about is matching the type to the impact, to the way in which the words fall from the voice of the narrator. It's a marvelous thing, and it conveys so much meaning. It's enabled me to see things that I wouldn't otherwise have got out of the poem. So I'm really very grateful to John. But let him say what he thinks about the project.
There's a lot to like about working with David as a friend and as a colleague and as a fellow artist. I like his eye for composition and color and especially texture. I like his willingness to explore. And with the Glass Bead Game, I also like that he's picked up what feels to me like a mid-century vibe. Mid-century is going to be characterized by straight lines and hard edges, very mechanical, in some cases very light, in other cases, heavy and concrete slabs and glass and metal. But that look feels entirely appropriate for the mid-century publication of the Glass Bead Game. I think the social and political forces that formed one also formed the other. I also like that it's abstract. With poetry or any art really, you're trying to help the viewer, the reader, the listener get to a place beyond words that's deeper, that's communicating on more channels. There's some irony in that a poet is using words to do that, but that's the art of poetry. For a typeface, I picked a font called Roboto. Roboto is actually a modern face, but it has that mid-century feel. It's very simple. It's condensed. It has hard edges and sharp corners and is mechanical. By that I mean it's not something you could draw with a pen. And it just seemed like a very natural pairing to go along with the feel of David's prints. As for the book, the poetry, the message, the meaning, oh my goodness, we probably could have some really interesting discussions about that, but that'll have to wait for another time. Again, it's a privilege working with David on this project and on his other ones. Thanks.
Hermann Hesse's The Glass Bead Game. I've returned to it on and off down the decades, and it's always intrigued me. It's a great novel. The little poem towards the end of the book is kind of a miniature picture of what the Glass Bead Game is all about. And I've tried to illustrate it with some intaglio etchings, some done on copper plates, some on zinc plates, and put together the sort of shards of meaning, bits of colour, bits of texture, bits of geometry, if you like, because the bead game itself is about both mathematics and about music, primarily, but not exclusively. So it's an intriguing book, but my friends John McWade, Heidi Wilson, Roger Buckton have helped me to understand it in a way that I didn't quite have a handle on before the project began. So thank you very much to all of them. If you'd like to learn a little bit about the kind of theology that undergirds some of the ideas in the Glass Bead Game, you can find it in the information link to kiwiconnexion below. Meantime, we're going to end with Roger playing a somewhat different interpretation on a flute that's been pitched a little lower than what we heard at the beginning. And we've got a slight redesign of the slides as well. So, thanks for watching.
The Glass Bead Game by Hermann Hesse. Are we ready to listen in reverence to music of the universe and music of the masters? To call to the celebrations, the venerated spirits of inspired times? We let ourselves be elevated by secret forms of writing, by whose spell the boundlessness and storms and life itself have emerged as clear parables. They sing like crystal constellations. When we walk in their footsteps, they give meaning to our lives. Not one can fall out of its circle, except toward the sacred center.